I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
You're watching Worldview Tube, a Brannon House television network.
The Tamara Scott Show. Tamara has served as the state director for one of America's largest pro-life, pro-family public policy organizations. In 2007, Tamara was named one of America's top 10 most influential kingmakers by the Religion News Association. Tamara has spent years proclaiming and defending the values of a Christian worldview that is the foundation of our constitutional republic. And now, here is your host, Tamara Scott.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us. It is Tuesday. We could call it Truth Tuesday if we wish. Tuesday, June 24, 25. 2/24/25, and the year in our Lord. I like to say that because our founding fathers used to say that. And we quit doing things like that, then we see fools who try to tell us that we shouldn't be pushing a God in our government, which our government, as Bobby Jindal says, we would not have without our God. So, in the year of our Lord. Now, today joining me is Congressman Steve King, the Honorable Steve King. I could talk to him about any topic. This is the problem. I try to use full restraint, not to call Congressman King all the time because he has so much information and experience and wisdom on so many topics. And we all love to hear from him. So I try not to call him very often, but I'm thankful when I do. He's good to oblige us and to come on and talk with us today. So we're going to talk about a variety of issues. We'll talk about the Middle East, of course. We'll talk about what's happening over there. But first, we've got the CO2 pipeline as well. So I thank you for joining us every Monday through Friday, noon Central Time. And then those links are free and complimentary. We try to get them on the Tamara Scott Show Facebook page. And then they go to the vault, the Worldview, worldview.com/vault. worldview.com/vault or worldviewtube.com/vault. And so you can find those shows there for a very reasonable membership. And you also get all of Brandon's information as well from 35 years experience, interviews, conferences, etc. So we're honored to be a part of this network. We're honored that you join us as we help you live God's word in today's world when the headlines hit home. All right, Congressman King. I think I put your book back over on the counter. The book, give us the title of your book.
Oh, okay. I think it's right here.
Thank you.
It is, the title of the book is Walking Through the Fire, and the subtitle is My Fight for the Heart and Soul of America. And it's about walking, well, not literally, but figuratively walking through the political fire when all the forces lined up against me for a misquote in the New York Times, and now we know what their motivation was, but it took a while for it to unfold. So I get a fair amount of compliments about this book, and it got a lot off my chest, and people are saying, write a sequel, and that's a lot of work. Oh, but good things take a lot of work and they take discipline. So we shall see. But I'd like to get this CO2 saga to a conclusion and then write a book about all of the things that have unfolded with the power play that's going on in the upper Midwest and Washington, D.C., of the leaders that have capitulated to the influence, and also our noble warriors that stood up against that and were able to at least achieve a part of a victory here in Iowa and really not complete, but a very substantial victory in South Dakota as well.
Absolutely. So we want to get to that. And you would be able to write a book from all the experience. And I'm thinking that some of the same power struggles that came against you as one of our best constitutional congressional members ever for Iowa, you still are probably our top constitutional congressional member we've ever had. Phyllis Shapley said so. I think she's right. I think it's still true today. But the same powers that probably came after you, I think some of them are the same and mixed up in this. And it's the same old issue of money and greed. And when I saw that the governor had sadly vetoed this bill, First thing that came to mind was money is the root of this veto. Instead of money is the root of all evil, money is the root of this veto. And let me just explain that. I am not even saying that it was a bribe. We'll wait and see if it's a promise of a job yet to be, or someone else said this. It could be that she was hoping all those promises of economic development for our state. And you can answer that as well. Wasn't necessary. We don't need this to save ethanol, and there's no promise that this green scheme would help with any of that, correct?
Well, and I do agree with that. And just thinking about this to lay a little bit more of the framework for people that are watching from across the country. Here in the upper Midwest, the Corn Belt, we call it affectionately, there's five states in the upper Midwest that that are brought in on this. And we produced an ethanol industry because corn was worth like $1 a bushel. And we were good at it, but it wasn't worth anything. And so we ended up with the 57 ethanol plants that are signed up by Bruce Rastetter and Summit with the assistance, I believe, of Harold Hamm, the father of fracking. And now they have a stranglehold on those ethanol plants. They want to build a pipeline between all of them, 2,500 miles of pipeline, to take the CO2 that emits into the air and goes back into the next year's crop, by the way, and just rotates, to take that CO2 and pipe it up to North Dakota within a few miles of the oil fields, but of course not in the oil fields. They wouldn't use it for fracking when they're talking to Iowans, but they sure will use it for fracking when they're talking to North Dakotans. And so this whole scheme has been something that has been manipulated for a long time. It goes clear back at least to 2007, where we had Governor Chet Culver signed a memorandum of understanding that opened the door for some of this. It was one step along the way. And also it emanated out of the World Economic Forum sometime prior to that. But this idea that we're going to have carbon credits and that we're going to control the emissions of CO2 and we're going to capture some of it in free air and sequester it underground, and somehow we're going to turn God's thermostat down by doing something as ridiculous and just as awfully expensive as that is. So that's the brainchild of Bruce Rastetter, to connect all these ethanol plants, to go into the boards of directors and say, I'll make a deal with you. I'll take that CO2 off your hands, no charge. Some of them got a little smarter, and the prices, I'm confident, went up, but those contracts are all confidential, locked down confidential. We don't really know what's in them, and we don't know what the expiration dates are on them, if there are at all. So this whole network and connection was put together. And if he's able to achieve connecting all of these ethanol plants and pumping that CO2 up to North Dakota as he plans to do, then they'll be cashing in on around $1.3 or $4 billion a year. But in the end, we the taxpayers pay for the infrastructure of the pipeline, and not only at the cost of our land that it gets bulldozed through, and the cost of our taxpayers, and the cost of borrowing the money from China and Saudi Arabia. And while we've got Chinese investors in the investment companies that are part of this operation, not only with all of that, paying for this with our constitutional right to property. And that is the most outrageous. You can spend money stupidly and you can run our economy down into the drink. But if you attack a framework, a foundation of our constitutional rights, which is the very foundation of free enterprise itself, if you don't have a right to property, you don't invest any money. You don't build a gas station or a donut shop or a factory. You don't even buy a house. But if the government or somebody that has more power and more money than you have can come along and take it. I grew up in a time when you just understood that if you could buy a house and pay for it and pay the taxes, nobody could move you off of that place. Now, for a road or a bridge, that's a legitimate eminent domain, but that's not a lot of real estate. This is 2,500 miles. And then it locks the ethanol plants in where they can't do anything except capitulate to Bruce Rastetter and Summit. So it traps the ethanol plants from doing anything else to add value to the CO2. And we've got two companies who want to take that CO2, convert it to methanol right at the ethanol plant locations. And there's a huge growing market for methanol. For example, Maersk, the largest container ship country in the world, 742 ships on the high seas, new ones being built that will burn methanol and others being converted for methanol, say they can take all the methanol we can produce on 40 ethanol plants just to power their ships on the high seas. And so the demand is there, the science is there, there's no reason for eminent domain. And we have a rogue Iowa Utilities Commission. They are rogue. And we've got a lockdown 21, or I'll say 21 Republican state senators that lined up against this thing. They didn't have a single substantive argument against House File 639 until the bill was to come to the floor on a Friday. And these 20 or 21 of them had these notes in their hands, and they started to berate our dauntless dozen who were holding their ground and berated them off these talking points. Curiously, I talked to one of the state senators who came up to talk to me. I was in the Capitol those days, and he said that, that the bill had been written by the Sierra Club, which it wasn't. I was in the middle of that all the way through. It wasn't written by the Sierra Club. By the way, I called him and asked him. They don't claim that it was. He said, no, it wasn't. And that the state would get sued because the contract that doesn't exist with Summit sets up a vested interest. And so therefore, all the money that they have poured into this project, they would turn around and sue the state for all of their poor, imprudent business decisions. Well, we're not vulnerable to that from a lawsuit standpoint. We're not liable. And on top of that, Mike Busolo, state senator, from the floor of the Iowa Senate, invoked a lawsuit against the state of Iowa that's called touch play. When the state repealed their legalization of gambling machines, which was a good thing, and I believe, was it Tom Vilsack signed that, if I'm not mistaken, and the state was sued over that, and Busolo implied that the state had lost and they were vulnerable to $1 billion, and that we're vulnerable to $1 billion if this bill passes. But what the court really decided was, no, all those gambling operations, 6 or 7 of them, I think is the number, none of them had any vested right, even though they had a contract with the state. So it couldn't be more ludicrous, but those are the arguments they made. And when I asked that state senator, well, this briefing document you have, I'd sure like to see that because that doesn't match up with anything I know. And he said, well, I can't show it to you. It's a caucus document, therefore it's confidential. Well, it was confidential to the dauntless dozen too, Tamara. And that's really that's a nasty place to be when you're doing politics. You line up against people in your own party, of presumably your own ideology, who are standing on principle, standing on the Constitution, standing on fiscal responsibility, and protecting the interests of Iowans. And you lock them out, and you use a bunch of information to ambush them with, and then turn on them on the floor and berate them on top of that. I bit my lip for a long time, but that part's over now. We got to speak up.
We've got to go to break. Congressman King, always so much great information. We'll be right back. Stay tuned because there's more to cover on this. And we get to the Middle East and how it impacts us here at home. Stay tuned. The Tamara Scott Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
And we always tell you about our Bella Grace. You can go to Tamara, TAMARA.BellaGraceGlobal.com. Why? Because we want you feeling your best. So you can be on the front lines with us, protecting your family and your future. Now, this is the Cinder Little sachet. Inside is the collagen elixir with the cat's claw and astaxanthin. Got an award in 2022 for cognitive function and in 2023 in the sports arena for active ingredients, nutrition, and format. But the best is what many of you noticed, just things that you as viewers, as friends of the show, let us know that you had experienced, whether it was better joint health, improved mobility, less fatigue, helping with stress management, endurance, muscle recovery, mental clarity, focus, gut health, and immunity. All of those things, very helpful, right? But there was also the eyes. And I noticed this after some of you mentioned it. Alleviating computer vision syndrome, visual acuity enhanced, depth perception better, and alleviating dry eyes. Notice that. There's also the fun list, the firmer skin, smoother skin texture, fewer fine lines and wrinkles, improved skin elasticity, decreased age spots, more even skin tone, improved skin hydration, reduced oxidative stress, healthier nails, less cellulite, better hair, and better sleep. Who doesn't want any of that? Call it cosmetic if you want, but maybe it's a byproduct of being healthier. You can find more information at tamara.bellagraceglobal.com. tamara.bellagraceglobal.com. All right, I'm talking with the Honorable Steve King. We're talking right now about the CO2 pipeline. And after years, I mean years of discussion and battle, 12 courageous senators, the House members did their part. The House did their part, and they got this to a vote. And as Brad Sherman wrote in one of his articles, the leadership in the House saw that the pendulum had swung back to a position of a little more conservatism and constituents as far as care of the body, and they paid attention. The Senate leadership, not so much in Brad Sherman's article, but here's what we noticed. 78%, and correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, you studied this issue. You have the Free Soil Foundation, where people can get more information. But 78% approval of Iowans wanted that bill. 78%. I mean, I've not been in politics at the depth you have been, but 54% is usually considered a majority. 51% is a majority. 60% is a mandate. 78%? Wow. I mean, I hate to say it, but it was a betrayal, a turn your back on your state at 78%. And then 75% of the legislature with the Senate's vote, and sadly 21 turning their backs on constituents and the Constitution. 21 Republicans who should know better. And let me just say this, I'm always disappointed when Republicans give Democrats the opportunity to look good. I like it when Democrats come along and are reasonable, but when we set them up to look good because we're doing poor, I hate that. And that's what happened in the Senate. And you didn't even mention names of some of those senators who were so nasty. And you said information, and I would say misinformation. By some of them. Sad to me, but we had a bipartisan bill, 75% approval of the legislature, 78% approval of Iowans, Republican, Democrat, and it was stopped with the stroke of the pen. At the same time this came out, Simone Biles had just made her nasty little tweet about Riley Gaines. She came after, and the memes came out that she had ruined her legacy with one tweet, and I almost said ruined legacy with one veto. Right? This is disastrous. I don't know how you recover from this. It's unfortunate because we have always been a fairly solid party, always worked together, kept the disagreements behind closed doors, were respectful if we could. But as you said, what was unleashed on the Senate floor was unnecessary and unfortunate. And now all the gates have opened, all the doors have opened, and whether it's Representative Bobby Kaufman, Representative Steve Holt, others are coming out and just laying it open before the people. And frankly, they were left no choice.
Well, that's all true, Tamara. And I would even up this a bit on the data. The data you've given is 75% of all the legislators in the 150 between the House and the Senate vote, I believe is how that came up. But we look back to 2 or 3 years ago when we had the 90% bill. It passed the floor of the House with 78% of the members voting. Those people that took a walk, I don't count them. But 78% of the members voting, that also matched the Des Moines Register's poll. And that went across all demographics, age, politics, and I'll say all kinds of demographics. And so it was 78% issue then. And we should remember that the House members are closer to the constituents than the senators are. They're only half the size, and they get out about the same amount of time, and they're closer. So they have their finger on the pulse better by design. And then, but on the vote in the House this time on House File 639, that vote was, I'll call it 90% of the members voting. There were maybe 4 or 5 that didn't. And actually, it's 89.47, just to be specific. And I just round that to 90. So you've got a 90% issue in the Iowa House. And you go over to the Iowa Senate, and all they're trying to do is just kill the bill. They don't want to debate on the floor. They don't want to debate in committee. Mike Brusilo, he, as the chairman of the Commerce Committee, filed a strike all amendment in the weekend to House File 639, which it looked like he was going to manipulate or try to manipulate that bill to bring out some Rastetter language on it, was my anticipation. But thanks to Kevin Lon's quick work and thinking, he filed a second strike all amendment over the top of that, which prevented Senator Busolo from doing what we call double barrel, which is if you drop 2 amendments on top of a bill, then those amendments stand in the way of amending any other part of the bill. So that's what really allowed that to happen, is Kevin Alonzo's filing of that second amendment. And then it put him in a place where the bill almost had to come to the floor, because the intention in the remarks made by the chairman of the Commerce Committee had said it that way, but he didn't get his way. And so then they got into I'll say, of all the time that I was involved in that, I had a whip card, and we're talking to people, and I'm getting secondhand information, yes. And we've got lobbyists in the Capitol working for Free Soil, well, not Free Soil, but Land of the Free Action is our C4. And so I'm getting these messages back, pulling a whip card together. I had at least 28 of the 35 Republican senators that had indicated they were prepared to vote for the bill, at least 28 of them. And we ended up with, the number was what, 20, only 12, I believe, was the number that finally voted for the bill. But that's because the full court press from the Summit lobby came in. And I know what that looks like, Tamara. I remember a time when I was in the Iowa Senate, and there was a gambling bill that came to the floor. And I had just pledged that I'll vote for anything that shrinks or abolishes gambling, and I'll vote against anything that expands it. It's pretty easy for me. But the bill for gambling failed by, I'll say, a fairly substantial margin, 5 or 6 or 7 votes, something like that. And the majority leader changed his vote and voted with the prevailing side so he could bring it up on a motion to reconsider. Well, in that period of time, that was 10:30 in the morning. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, they brought the same bill back up again on a motion to reconsider, and 12 votes changed. 12 of them changed. That's the gambling lobby. And you can imagine that when you've got Summit's massive lobby, they said in Pierce, South Dakota, they had as many as 20 lobbyists in the Capitol in South Dakota pushing their legislation there, while they're telling us in Iowa you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. So there was a lot of power there. And we didn't know what would be the objection by Jack Whitford, the majority leader, or Amy Sinclair, the president, or Mike Clemish, the whip, the rest of them on down the line. What were their objections? We didn't know what they were when the sun came up on Friday morning, but they got that briefing document and they began to voice it, and they just pummeled. I want to give the names I can also of the Dauntless Dozen. I looked them up here so I wouldn't forget anybody, and I had him in a group in my iPhone. But Kevin Alonzo, I mentioned Kevin, he was actually the driving, organizing, leading force on this, and he did a terrific job. He analyzes things down to the finest of decisions, and once he's comfortable, then he moves. Doug Campbell, a fireball that came in just in this last election, and he's a tremendous, smart asset. Yes.
They did everything they could to keep him from coming in. Remember, he had a primary against somebody who apparently was on the side of this pipeline, and it was a nasty primary. And as it was, God had his way. The individual stepped aside after the primary, and Doug swooped in. And they even came against him in his convention, but he won.
A little bit of providential intervention there, I will call that. It was a terrific thing to watch and be part of. And Doug and Karen are just fighters. They're so faithful. They're just tremendous. And then Lynn Evans, who really stood up very, very well. He was a steady hand in the middle of all that, that more or less kept the group together in a way, and his clear thoughts on what you needed to do. One of his was that, why are we trying to argue with these people? Maybe we'll just sit there and let them berate us, and then we'll just get them to walk out. I thought that was pretty good advice. Dennis Guth farms up there from northern Iowa, and I've known Dennis a long time, and I count him as a friend. And he's a solid Christian constitutionalist as well.
And
And
I
then,
won't say he's a constitutionalist because he's falsely supporting the Convention of States. I wish we could put him in that category, but he can't explain it, but he goes along with it because of the people who are telling him to.
well, I shouldn't have put that bait out there, Tamara. But the other aspects I want to defend Dennis Guth, and I
Yeah.
agree with you on
Otherwise, great guy.
on.
Otherwise, great guy.
And then Mark Lofgren, one of the clearest, most solid of all the senators in this group. I called him the Dauntless Dozen. And I actually haven't met him, but I just know him from reputation and how he conducts himself. Mike Pike, another fresh name, fairly fresh name in the Iowa Senate. He has clarity of political conviction. He's a solid conservative. He understands how business works and how to get things done. Dave Rowley is another one. He's an insurance fellow from up around the Okoboji area. And I've known Dave for a lot of years. And I've sat and talked with him for about 2 hours on this one day, and he held strong. Some thought he wouldn't, but he did. We all know Sandy Salmon, and Sandy is she's just a workhorse and
Marine. A Marine.
yes, a Marine looking for a fight.
She doesn't look for a fight, but she won't back down. She has
Well,
stood alone to the governor, Branstad. As a freshman, she stood alone and helped homeschoolers gain so much in one bill, 1 year, her freshman year.
No, she is completely solid, and she knows where to drop the bills in, and how to drive the wedges in, and how to get things moving. And then we have Dave Sayers. Dave Sayers, he's a super self-confident, outspoken, robust individual. The kind of individual you need in that group to hold some of the other people together, be how I would put that. And then Jeff Taylor, he's a professor of constitutional and political science and constitutional law up at Dordt College. And Jeff, he comes off as a kind of a quiet, demure fella until you stir him up. And he becomes just precisely articulate and principled. And I just think a lot of him. And then Sherry Lynn Westrich, she's a feisty one. And whenever things get a little bit flat, Sherry Lynn would have a way to throw some things in there that would just spark the situation, clarify it for everybody, and they moved on in the right direction. And then I want to say also, that's 11. And Rocky DeWitt on that list in the beginning, and I keep him on my list regardless. Rocky has been fighting pancreatic cancer all the way through. A lot of people thought that he wouldn't really even get into the session, that he should go home and wait out his time. And Rocky more or less made a pledge to himself that he was going to see it through. And he made a pledge with the other 11 that he would not vote for an appropriation bill coming out of the House, out of the Senate, unless and until House File 639 came to the floor for a vote. Well, in the end, they pummeled Rocky, and he voted against 639, but he kept his word that he would hold out until they got a vote on it. And so I keep him in that category. So do the other 11. And today he may be in his last day or days, but he's just earned my awesome respect for how strong he has been, and how he kept his word, and how he reached down within himself to force his mind and sinew to serve his will long after they were gone. I'm fumbling up that Kipling poem, but you know what I'm saying. So I have great respect for them, and I've never seen anything like this before, Tamara.
It's unfortunate we had to see it now, and very thankful for those 11 and 12 and the House members. And I know the governor loves the state, but this is the tough politics. This is the messy part of politics. And I will say this, Ratstetter did all these, it's like you wanted to set himself up to do what Rockefeller did back in the 20s with pharmaceuticals or the educations or the Rothschilds. It's almost like he's setting his own little fiefdom up at the cost of our liberties, our constitutional protections. And for those politicians, sadly, who went along with it, I have to ask you, have you allowed your donor to become your owner?
Hmm.
We've got to go to break. We'll be right back.
Sounds like it, Tamara.
And thank you, Caleb. You have to break us up when we're on break because you would just have to break in because Congressman King and I could talk. Anybody could talk to him forever. I have to tell this. One time I was leaving an event. It was late. It was like 11:30 at night. I was getting gas at a station and I heard this voice and I thought, that is Congressman King pumping his own gas at 11:30 at night. I went over and said hello. He'd just come in from a Phyllis Schlafly event where they honored him, rightfully so. And this little gas station was kind of an eatery type. It had a little table where you could sit. And so I was with another RNC member and we stopped and talked with the congressman for probably an hour, probably till 1 o'clock, hearing about the trips he'd had as he was studying Western civilization. He was studying Christianity. And without those two things, we don't have liberty. And that is why I think some of these folks came after him with such fierce ferocity, because he was going to cripple the globalist movement across our nation and across our globe. He was chipping away at it and they couldn't have it. That's why I think they came after him. Just my opinion. All right, NUMI. We always tell you about NUMI, neumi.com/TTSS, neumi.com/TTSS. On your screen, you'll see all of the products they have right now. The lavenders for ladies, you can use it at any point in your journey. If you're on a hormonal supplement, you might want to talk with your doctor just to make sure there's no contraindicative, I think that's the way you say it, issues, but there are no hormones in the lavender. The blue has a glutathione. Glutathione is a word I didn't know, but if you are an oxygen-based life form, like we are, you would not survive 3 to 7 minutes without it. It's also an antioxidant, helps with 400 cellular functions in your body, and it helps detox heavy metals, forever chemicals, graphene oxide, one of those nasty words we didn't even know until 2020. It also helps detox glyphosate. Glyphosate is used in farm products and lawn products. You would recognize the name, but there are concerns with links to cancer, HPPs, and diabetes. The blue bottle detoxes heavy metals, forever chemicals, glyphosate, and graphene oxide. So then also the new orange colored or mango colored bottle, Numi Neuro, helps with mind, memory, and focus. Many folks after 2020, whether it was a shot, an injection, or a virus, noticed they had some brain fog. This helps with that. When used with the blue bottle, the results were so great that the American Brain Council actually wrote such a good review, that it's an endorsement, considered an endorsement. And I hear that doesn't happen very often at all from the American Brain Council. So neumi.com/TTSS. All right, Congressman King, we're going to get to the Middle East, but this is why I struggle not calling you like once a week to have you come on the show, because there's so much we could talk about. We're going to come back and circle up one more thing on the governor. And Caleb, if you would just put up that photo, it's the KCCI Facebook post. Governor vetoes eminent domain bill. And she says, well, I share the bill's goal of protecting landowners. Good policy should draw clear, careful lines, and this bill does not. If that were the case, there'd be a lot of other crummy bills that we wouldn't have passed and she wouldn't have signed, including the one that allowed people to change their sex presentation on our driver's licenses and on birth certificates. Should have never happened. And I'm not sure if we've got that fixed yet. So here's our chance to make that clear and concise line in a ad bill. All right, Congressman.
Well, first of all, I'd say Governor Reynolds had no precise, clear lines that she recommended on how to solve this problem. And as I read her veto report, it was a full page or maybe even a page and a half. I saw things in there that when you're in this business for a long time, you get to feel for the flow of how the thought process is going. And I know she met with people that were opponent or proponents of this bill that would have stood up and defended the property rights and brought sanity. I know that she listened to them, but I imagine she was also listening to the other side of this. That gave her at least the excuse that she's weighing it. If she hadn't had those meetings, then that wouldn't be an excuse. But as I read it, it was, well, here's some of the things that are wrong with it. There's the generality that says that you have to have adequate insurance before you can build a pipeline, and that there's a sunset of 25 years on the permit. So you can only pump through that pipe for 25 years. Those kind of things were what she said were problems. And then the Sires pipeline is only 30 miles long, and that runs from Council Bluffs east about 30 miles. And that would be the pipeline that they would use to go across Nebraska if they can't get into South Dakota. They don't need eminent domain for that, as I understand. But she said that would kill the Sires project because they wouldn't want to have adequate insurance and they want to have it last longer than 25 years. And so these are things are all, if that was a problem, the legislature could come together in 24 years and say, we'll grant you another permit for 25 years. That was a pretty simple one to deal with. Adequate insurance, how does he stand on that? So I think as I read that, she went shopping for excuses to veto the bill. I think she knew what she was going to do. The people that were talking with her would come back and report to me and say, she feels like sitting in that room with her, the sense is that she feels guilty. It's like she's in the principal's office being dressed down. Now, that was pretty curious for a governor that has found her own power base. She's not shy about her own power base, but that indicates to me, and that's just secondhand information, but that there's a guilt there that I believe that she knew what she was doing is wrong. In fact, I sent her James 4:17, and just by text, you know exactly what that says, Tamara. If you fail to do what you know is right, you have sinned. And she didn't answer that one. I think I sent her one other one too. Maybe I just sent her a tweet. But I feel bad that this has happened, and I do think that she has destroyed her legacy. And if this can be pushed through the upper Midwest here, if Bruce Rastetter can do this, and if Harold Hamm, the fracking giant, can do this, and they can hold these credits together in Washington, D.C., and then push it through to bulldoze their way through our private property rights, there'll be nothing that stops them if they want to put a wind turbine in your backyard or solar panels on your roof. You just won't have any rights as long as somebody has more money and more power. And they even tried to pass a bill that said if you'll write a $10 million check to the federal government, you can run a pipeline anywhere in America you want, and we will expedite that permit at the federal level, and we'll use eminent domain to do it. That's just breathtaking. We got it stopped, but okay, I can maybe take a deep breath now after you let me. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest, Tamara.
And it's one thing if this were utility that the public needed, but as the Sierra Club, a liberal climate watch group has said it's a green scheme. It's a green scheme. It is not necessary. To me, it's like saying, I will take the caffeine and the calories out of your water, but I'll have to use up a lot of your water to do it. And you'll have to give me control of the source of your water, which is already in risk of a drought this year. It's just such a dangerous foolish idea. And as Representative Holt, who's usually a good Marine to march along and do what is the call, has come out and said, you know, this governor never let us know her thoughts on this bill, never gave us a concern. We could have worked with her, never heard anything. I will tell you this, Congressman, it is catching on. We had 5 or 6 states that maybe paid attention. I got a call to do some press on it out of Arkansas. It is catching on. And so I will help you connect with a lot of those legislators if I can, and let's see what we can do to protect constituents and constitutional rights across this nation. We are all about free enterprise, investment, and profit. We get it. We get it, but not at the loss of liberty, constitutional rights, and freedom.
Exactly.
All right. Let's get to the Middle East. You know, something big happened over there in the last couple of days. First off, I have to just ask you, have you ever seen such a precision mission that was never leaked? Not to the media. After this media has gone after Pete Hegseth about leaking this or having a relative on a call or in an email group or a signal group, nothing. Even folks at the Pentagon, I'm told, said they didn't hear a whisper.
Well, I did hear about an hour before they struck that there was an operation going on because there were a lot of pizzas being sold around the Pentagon. And that's one of the ways that they get predictions on, or if the traffic in the restaurants dies down because they're ordering pizzas. There's 2 things there. Watch the traffic in and out of the restaurants and watch and see which pizzas are going where. And if there's a lot more pizzas, then they're stocking it in for the long haul. So that was the clues that I found, but I didn't know that in advance. And I think it was a terrific operation. It was terrific from an intelligence standpoint, from a security standpoint. And you know, we've got some members of Congress, what is her name? Is it Jasmine Crockett, that's screaming that you didn't tell us in advance. You have to tell us in advance. Can you imagine her keeping her mouth shut about anything?
No.
You just can't, there's bound to be leaks. And you know, we go into conference in Congress and it's supposed to be omerta in there. Nothing leaks out of that so we can talk to each other. But it's going out while you're sitting in there. People are texting things out and tweeting things out. So no, it would have been a leak. They held it really, really tight. And I think it was really hard down to need to know basis. And you don't need to know it early, only as soon as you need to know it. So they flew missions out of there, 16, 18 hours out of Whiteman Air Force Base in down by Kansas City. And
it was 30 from what I heard, 38 to 40 hours.
Yeah.
Being back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I checked to see if our 185th Air Guard out of Sioux City, if they'd been called up, their KC-135s, and I didn't find that they had been. But it's people like that, it's our Guard that run the tankers and also the active duty personnel that do. They kept those planes flying. They flew diversion flights around in opposite directions just to confuse everything, and came in there. And the Israelis had knocked out all their defense forces, and they couldn't see them coming, and they couldn't see them going. And you can look at those 2 locations that were hit with the mother of all bombs, and there's like 3 holes in each of the 2 mountains, precision. They're just all clustered right together, and it did knock out at least the access to us and much of the infrastructure inside, and they hit the others with Tomahawk missiles. So this was a tremendous operation without it never getting shot at all the way through. Smart, well done, strategic. And when Trump would, he set it out through Carolyn Levitt that he would make a decision within a couple of weeks. And I thought, well, in a couple of weeks, this is wartime. You don't make decisions like that on a timetable, because I'm thinking he's going to decide in 2 weeks. And what's the press conference date and time? No, he made a decision within 2 weeks. When he said that, he already had made the decision, Tamara. And that was just the timing of let your guard down, guys. And they came in and dropped it. So it was terrific. It was terrific.
I said we've all talked about his art of the deal, right? I mentioned that when he was dealing with foreign diplomacy in his first term, but this was the art of deception. Mm-hmm. And he did it very well. He held his cards close and he did it very well. And so I checked with Colonel John Eidsmoe, I believe you know him, constitutional scholar who's written 16 books, several on the Constitution. And he said, absolutely, this president was within his constitutional limits. He mentions Article 1, Section 8, yes, which gives Congress a right to call war. But he also, as Article 2, Section 2, the president is the commander in chief. And as far as giving notice 48 hours afterwards, not only did he give it it to those in Congress. He gave it to the whole nation 48 hours afterwards. And so he addressed the nation. And, you know, you were in Congress, I'm assuming that Obama, some of these other folks did similar missions. Well, not nearly as precise. Obama with his drones harmed and injured and killed many, from what I understand. But, you know, Hillary Clinton, we have her on record saying she would take out a nuclear Iran. This is not new. This is what leaders across the globe have said. They could not have nuclear power. And we finally found one to make sure they didn't.
I just earlier today I X'd out on my Twitter account a picture that shows Obama and President Trump, and on the picture of Obama it just says Iran, and on the picture of President Trump it says I didn't, and that just tickled me, and I had to send it out without comment. You don't have to comment on that one, but you know they didn't want to take this on when it needed to be, and Obama is sneaking and flying cash over to Iran, more or less to bribe them not to build nuclear, and they use the money to build nuclear. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. And then, so I looked it up, and Obama he bombed, I believe it was 7 different countries, and there were thousands of civilians, non-combatants, that were killed in those bombings. So he was doing most of that on the AUMF, the Authorization for Military Force, that was passed in 2001 or 2, right before I got there, actually. And that's what George W. Bush used, and that's what Obama used, and that's also, I think, along the way. It still remains if it's after Al-Qaeda and their successors. So that's a big question. These guys aren't necessarily, they're Shias rather than Sunnis. So that's a debatable question. But if you handcuff the president and you say, you can't order any military action until you come to Congress and ask our permission, that means that we can't defend ourselves if the nuclear missiles are coming down on us. This is the real world. We've got to be able to have a president that will act decisively and instantaneously. And you have to have orders of operation that are triggered without having to go to the president. Certain standards that if they know they have to shoot back, because you don't have time to call the president on some of those circumstances. So, but I will say, if we had a little more time,
we got one more break. Let's get that one break in here. We're already late on it. We'll get that. We'll squeeze that break in there. I apologize, Caleb. We'll get it in there and then we'll come back. Stay tuned, Congressman King.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
All right, talking with Congressman King, and you all are missing some of the best conversations during our breaks. Sorry. All right, so Congressman King, as I tell him, has so much experience. We just saw an article from the Crown Prince. Most people didn't even realize there was still a Crown Prince around, or that there was ever a Crown Prince out of Iran. You not only knew it, you knew him.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us.
Sure. I chaired the Conservative Opportunity Society for 16 years, and that meant that every Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock, I put a hot breakfast in front of other conservative members of Congress, and you always had to have grits because you can't fill up the table without bringing some Southern conservatives in. And so I'd always be looking around for who's interesting, who needs to have a little platform. And I had settled on that because I was always interested in Iran and the high drama when we had the 444 days of hostages under Jimmy Carter, how that all played out, how Jimmy Carter welcomed the Shah of Iran welcomed the religious fundamentalists in 1979 because he thought, presumably, if you've got a religious fundamentalist, what could go wrong? So things went really wrong, and when they deposed the Shah, and so I wanted to hear from Reza Pahlavi is his name, the Crown Prince of Iran, and he has been exiled here in the United States for a long time, someplace on the East Coast, and so I've sat and talked with him in front of other people and in private as well, and he never took his eye off of Iran. His communications inside there were always his network were always something that were constructive, and he was always maneuvering to try to get Iran back free again and to get them to associate with the West. And that's what I think needs to happen now. And I'll just say maybe President Trump is playing some more of this maneuvering, but the idea that you're going to tell Israel and Iran, we're going to have a ceasefire now. The United States has got what we want. We killed off your nuclear program. I think that if you stop short of what needs to be encouraged to happen, if you let the Iranians, or excuse me, if you let the Israelites, the IDF, if you let them take on Iran and knock out their military capability, sooner or later the people in the streets will rise up. But we heard the Crown Prince say today, at least in that tape today, that they had shut down all the communications across that country. Even the landlines are down. And so they don't have a way to communicate to rise up, but there's still people in the streets that are demonstrating. And so I'm hopeful that Elon Musk will open up his Starlink for all of Iran, and they can link up something that a revolution can begin. And regime change is not a dirty word. It's just a word that's fallen out of favor with the isolationists that we have that have emerged, the libertarians that see themselves as isolationists. And so I'm concerned about whether or not we encourage that next step, because when you've got the military and much of the government decapitated and they're in chaos, that's the time to strike. And if you're going to stop shooting now, then they've got time to regroup themselves and get that country back under their control. And this could be the mirror of what happened when Ariel Sharon pulled out of Gaza, out of the Gaza Strip, and said, okay, you guys all run that. They had one election, Hamas elected their people, and then from there on out, they're a terrorist camp. And look what they've gone through in the last year and a half. That's what I'm worried about, Tamara.
Yeah, very good. Dr. Mark Christian joined us yesterday, and very similar to what you're saying. He thinks it should be gradual. He thinks the U.S. should invest and through business and infiltration in the culture, be able to help bring them along. Now, we did bomb a prison, and we've only got 30 seconds here, but apparently Israel or our folks, I'm not sure, opened the gates to a prison where a lot of the dissidents were, hoping that they would come out and help start that uprising. And we see it all over social media. I'll put a lot of it on Tamara Scott Show Facebook page. But the people are rising up. They're saying they don't hate Israel. They stand with Israel. And the same people that are terrorizing Israel is the same people terrorizing the people of Iran. So the people of Iran are getting it. The underground church continues to grow. Christianity has been there. I've worked with missions and missionaries and had them on this show. As they said, the borders were closed, the hearts were open, so we can continue to pray. We're out of time, Congressman King. Thank you so much for joining me today. So appreciate you and what you bring to the table on every discussion. To everybody out there, we must keep it in prayer that truth is revealed, falsehoods are exposed. Those who exalt the Lord and have good motive are, protected, that the innocents are protected, and those who have ill gain, let's see who they are. May God expose them and justice be done. To everybody, live boldly, love better, laugh bigger, be encouraged, and never be complacent.